She was crying when she told me about him, said he was controlling, that he lied, that he made her feel like she was always the problem. I remember sitting there listening, trying to comfort her, telling her she deserved better, that no one should treat her like that. And the whole time, I believed I was helping her, until she said something small, not important on its own, just a detail. The way she described something he did. Something specific. Something I had heard before. That's when I felt it. Not emotion. Just recognition. Because the person she was talking about wasn't just someone she was dating. It was my boyfriend. And she didn't know that I was the one he came home to after all of it. My name is Sarah. I'm 28 now, and at the time this happened, I had been in a relationship for just under 2 years. It wasn't intense, not the kind people talk about, just steady, and I had always thought steady meant safe. My boyfriend, Mark, was quiet, not distant, just controlled in the way he spoke, the way he reacted. He didn't over-explain things, didn't get overly emotional, and at the time, I saw that as maturity. He showed up when he said he would, texted consistently, nothing excessive, just enough to feel present. And over time, that became our rhythm. We had routines. Certain days we would meet. Certain places we would go. Nothing spontaneous, but nothing that felt missing either. It was predictable, and I trusted that predictability, because it didn't give me a reason not to. We didn't argue much. When we did, it was small, quick conversations. Nothing that stayed. Nothing that made me question anything long-term. And that's how I defined the relationship. Stable, reliable, easy to understand. At least, that's what I believed. My best friend, Lily, was the opposite in almost every way. She was expressive, open, the kind of person who said everything out loud. If something was wrong, I knew immediately. If something was good, I heard about that too. There was no guessing with her. And that's what made our friendship work. She felt everything. I processed everything. That balance had always been there. And it worked. At the time, Lily was seeing someone. But she didn't talk about him much, which was unusual for her. Normally, she would tell me everything. Names, details, stories. But this time it was different. She mentioned him once or twice, briefly, always in passing, never with detail. And when I asked casually, she would just say it was complicated. That was the word she used. Complicated. And then she would move on, change the subject, talk about something else. I didn't push it, because I didn't feel like I needed to. People open up when they're ready. And Lily always had. So I assumed she would eventually. Looking back, that was probably the first thing that didn't fully match. Not enough to question. Just different. But at the time, it didn't stand out. Because everything else in my life still made sense. My relationship with Mark stayed consistent. Nothing changed. Same routines. Same behavior. Same tone. He never mentioned anything unusual. Never gave me a reason to think there was something I didn't know. If anything, he felt more stable than ever. That's what made it easy to trust. Because there were no visible gaps. No sudden changes. No signs of distance. Everything stayed exactly where I expected it to be. There were small moments, though. Things I noticed but didn't hold on to. Like how sometimes he would be unavailable for a few hours. Not unreachable. Just delayed. And when he explained it, it always made sense. Busy. With friends. Out somewhere. Nothing specific enough to question. Just enough to accept. Or how Lily would sometimes disappear at the same time. Not always. Just occasionally. And I didn't connect those things. Because there was no reason to. They existed in separate parts of my life. Different conversations. Different spaces. I never thought to overlap them. That's how clear everything felt. My relationship was one thing. My friendship was another. There was no intersection. No shared ground. No reason for there to be. And when things feel that separate, you don't look for connections. You assume there aren't any. That's where I stayed. In that version of things. The one where everything made sense. The one where nothing overlapped. Because I trusted both of them. In completely different ways. And when you trust people like that, you don't look for inconsistencies. You don't question timing. You don't analyze details. You just accept what's in front of you. That's what I did. I stayed in that version of reality. The one where everything was exactly what it looked like. Until the day Lily called me and asked if we could talk. And something about her voice made me stop what I was doing. Not because she was crying. Not because she sounded upset. But because there was something different in it. Something heavier. More controlled. Like she had already been holding it in for a while. And that was the first moment. Those two separate parts of my life started to feel like they might not stay separate anymore. She came over that night. Not late, but later than usual for her. And the moment I opened the door, I could tell something was different. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just contained. Like she was holding everything in place instead of letting it out. We sat down the way we always did. Same spot. Same routine. And for a few minutes, she didn't say anything. Which wasn't like her. Normally, she would start talking before she even sat down. But this time, she stayed quiet. Looking at her hands. Like she was trying to decide where to begin. I didn't push. I just waited. Because I knew she would say it when she was ready. And after a while, she did. She started talking about him. Not his name. Not who he was. Just him. Said things had been difficult. That he had been acting differently. That she didn't know how to handle it anymore. And I listened. The same way I always had. Calm. Focused. Trying to understand what she was saying. At first, it sounded like what you would expect. A complicated relationship. Mixed signals. Uncertainty. Nothing that stood out on its own. But then the details started coming in. Small things. Specific moments. The way he spoke to her. The way he would disappear for hours. Then come back like nothing happened. How he avoided questions. Redirected conversations. Made her feel like she was overreacting. And that part made me pause slightly. Not visibly. Just internally. Because I had heard that pattern before. Not from her. From somewhere else. But I didn't say anything. I just kept listening. She kept talking. More openly now. Like once she started, she couldn't stop. Said he would make plans and cancel them. Then act like it wasn't a big deal. Said he didn't like talking about certain things. Would shut down when she asked questions. And again, that felt familiar. Not identical. Just close enough to notice. I told myself it was coincidence. Because those behaviors aren't unique. A lot of people act like that. So I didn't hold on to it. I let it pass. Then she said something else. Something smaller. But more specific. She mentioned a place. A restaurant. One I knew. Because I had been there. With Mark. Not recently. But enough to recognize it immediately. And she described something about that night. The way he acted. What he said. The exact tone he used. And that's when something shifted. Because it wasn't just the place. It was the way she described him. The words. The patterns. The way he handled the situation. It wasn't general anymore. It was specific. And it matched something I had experienced. I didn't react. Not outwardly. I just listened. Because I needed to hear more. Not to confirm it. Just to understand it. She kept going. Talking about how he would disappear for a few hours. Not answer messages. Then come back later. Come. Like nothing had happened. And explain it in a way that made sense just enough. That part stayed with me. Because I had seen that. Not in a way that felt wrong at the time. Just in a way that felt normal. And now, hearing it from her, didn't feel the same. It felt repeated. That was the moment something started connecting. Not clearly. Not completely. Just enough to stay. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't ask questions yet, because I didn't want to change how she was speaking. I needed her to continue naturally. She started describing how he would respond when she got upset, how he would stay calm, lower his voice, turn things around, make her feel like she was the one overreacting. And that was the part that landed differently, because it wasn't just behavior. It was a pattern of control, and I had seen that before, just not the same way. Not from the outside. She paused for a second, like she was deciding whether to say more. Then she did. She said his name. Not fully. Just once. In passing. Like it didn't matter. Like it was just part of the story. But I heard it. And for a second, everything felt still. Because it wasn't a common name. Not one you mistake easily. And I didn't react. Not immediately. Because I needed to be sure. Not emotionally. Just clearly. So I let her keep talking. And the more she spoke, the more everything aligned. The timing, the behavior, the places, the patterns. None of it was exact on its own. But together, it was too consistent to ignore. That was the shift. Not a realization all at once. Just pieces falling into place. Until they formed something clear enough that I couldn't explain it any other way. I still didn't say anything. I didn't stop her. I didn't ask directly. Because I needed one thing. One detail. That made it undeniable. And as she kept talking, I realized something. If what I was thinking was true, then this wasn't just her story. And it wasn't just my relationship. It was the same person. In two different versions. And the only question left was, how much of it overlapped? And how long it had been happening without either of us knowing. After that night, I didn't sleep the way I usually did. Not because I was upset. Just because my mind wouldn't settle on one version of things. Every detail she mentioned stayed with me. Not emotionally. Just precisely. I went over the conversation again. Not word for word. Just the structure of it. The way she described him. The timing. The behavior. And the more I thought about it, the more it stopped feeling like coincidence and started feeling like overlap. I didn't confront Mark. I didn't message Lily because I didn't want to interrupt anything yet. I needed to understand it fully first, not react to it. So I started paying attention to both of them separately, but with a different awareness now. The next time I saw Mark, nothing looked different. That was the first thing I noticed. No hesitation. No change in tone. No sign that anything else existed outside of what I already knew. He spoke the same way. Moved the same way. Stayed consistent. And that would have reassured me before. But now it did the opposite. Because I had seen another version of that same consistency. Through her. I watched small things more closely. The way he responded to messages. How long it took. When he was available. When he wasn't. And I started noticing something. The gaps. Not constant. Not obvious. Just consistent enough. There were periods where he would go quiet. Not unreachable. Just unavailable in a way that felt controlled. And when he came back, everything was normal. No explanation. Or just enough of one to move past it. That matched what she described. Exactly. I didn't react. I just noted it. Then I thought about timing. The days she mentioned. The times she said he would disappear. And I compared them. Mentally at first. Then more intentionally. And that's when it became clearer. There were overlaps. Moments where I thought he was busy. And now I had a different possibility for where he actually was. That was the second layer. Then I looked at my conversations with Lily. Not directly about him. Just timing. When she would be unavailable. When she wouldn't respond. And I saw the same pattern. Gaps. Followed by normal conversation. No explanation. Just continuation. And for the first time, those two patterns aligned. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to remove doubt. I still didn't say anything, because I needed more than alignment. I needed confirmation. Something clear. Something that didn't rely on interpretation. So I let things continue. Exactly as they were. I didn't change how I spoke to either of them. Didn't question anything directly. Because I needed them to stay in their natural patterns. That's how you see something clearly. Not by interrupting it, but by observing it as it is. A few days later, Lily messaged me again. Said she wanted to talk. Not in person this time. Just messages. And she started describing another situation. Something that had just happened. And as I read it, I didn't focus on what she felt. I focused on the details. The time. The place. The way he acted. And I knew exactly where Mark had told me he was that day. And it didn't match. Not even slightly. That was the moment it stopped being a possibility. And became something else. Because now it wasn't just patterns. It was contradiction. Clear. Undeniable. I still didn't respond to her differently. I stayed the same. Calm. Supportive. Because she didn't know. And that mattered. I needed her to keep speaking freely. Without hesitation. Without awareness. Because that was the only way I would see everything. Completely. After that, I started noticing something else. The way she described him emotionally. The way she reacted to him. It wasn't casual. It wasn't uncertain. It was attached. Consistent. Which meant this wasn't new. This had been happening long enough to feel established to her. That was the part that shifted everything. Because now I wasn't just looking at overlap. I was looking at duration. Time. And once time enters something like that, it changes the meaning completely. I didn't need more after that. Not really. But I still waited. Because I wanted one thing. One clear moment. One detail. That connected everything without question. And as I sat there thinking about it, one realization stayed with me. If this is true, then neither of us knows the full version. And that means the only person who does is him. Once I understood what I was looking at, I stopped trying to confirm it emotionally. Because emotionally it was already there. What I needed now was something precise. Something that didn't depend on how I felt. So I shifted how I handled everything. Without changing anything on the surface. With Mark, I stayed exactly the same. Same tone. Same routines. Same way of speaking. Because I needed him to stay comfortable. Unaware. That's when people don't adjust. That's when patterns stay visible. But internally, I started paying attention differently. Not to what he said, but to how he said it. The timing of things. The small pauses. The way he responded when I asked something simple. And I noticed something. He never over-explained. But he always explained just enough. Enough to close a question. Never enough to open one. That was important. Because it meant everything was controlled. Nothing was random. I also started watching his availability more closely. Not constantly. Just consistently. The gaps. The same kind I had noticed before. Now they felt structured. Like they belonged somewhere else. At the same time, I spoke to Lily more. Not in a different way. Just with more attention. I didn't ask direct questions. I didn't bring anything up. Because I needed her to stay exactly how she was. Open. Unfiltered. And she did. She kept talking about him. More than before now. Because once someone starts opening up, it becomes easier to continue. And every time she spoke, I focused on details. Not emotions. Details. Times. Places. Small things that could be placed somewhere. And I started aligning them. Quietly. Without reacting. A place she mentioned. Matched somewhere Mark had casually brought up before. But in a completely different way. A time she said he disappeared. Matched a gap I had already noticed. Not once. More than once. That's when it started feeling less like observation and more like confirmation building slowly.
But I still didn't act.
Because I needed something that didn't rely on interpretation. Something exact. So I gave it time. A few days. Then another. Letting everything continue naturally. Because patterns reveal themselves over time. Not in one moment. And then I did something slightly different. Not obvious. Just intentional. One evening, I asked Mark about his plans for the next day. Casual. The kind of question that doesn't stand out. He answered easily. Said he had a long day. Something with work. Meetings. Wouldn't be available much. It sounded complete. The kind of answer I would have accepted without thinking before. But now I didn't accept it. I noted it. The next day I didn't change my behavior. I didn't message him repeatedly.
Just one normal check-in.
He responded hours later. Short. Consistent with what he had said. Nothing that would stand out on its own. But now I was waiting for something else. Later that evening, Lily messaged me. Not immediately. Not exactly at the same time. But close enough. And she started talking about something that had just happened. I didn't rush to read it. I read it slowly. Carefully. Because I already knew what I was looking for. And as I read it, everything aligned. The time, the place, the sequence of events. Not similar.
Exact.
That was the first real confirmation. Not a pattern. Not an assumption. Just the same moment. Described from two different sides. I didn't react. I didn't stop her. I just let her keep talking. Because now I needed to see how consistent it was. Not just once, but again. And it didn't take long. A few days later, another conversation, another situation, another set of details. And again, it aligned. Perfectly. That was the moment it stopped being something I was investigating and became something I understood.
Completely.
But I still wanted one final thing. Not for proof. Just for clarity. So I asked her something small. The next time she mentioned him.
I said,
"What's his name again?"
Casual.
Like I had forgotten. Like it didn't matter. And she answered. Without hesitation. No pause. No second thought.
And that was it.
The name. The same one I already knew. The same one I had been hearing in two different versions. That was the moment everything settled. Because now there was no space left for interpretation. No possibility of coincidence. No gap between the two versions anymore. They were the same.
Completely.
I didn't feel the need to keep observing after that. Because there was nothing left to observe. Everything I needed to understand was already in front of me. The pattern, the timing, the behavior, the confirmation. All of it pointed to the same thing. This wasn't overlap. This wasn't confusion. This was one person, living two separate versions, at the same time. And both of us were inside it, without knowing about the other. That was the shift. Not emotional, not dramatic, just complete. Because now I wasn't trying to figure anything out anymore. I already knew. The only thing left was what I was going to do with it. By the time I decided to confront him, I wasn't unsure anymore. There was nothing left to confirm. No missing pieces. Just clarity. And that made everything simpler. Not easier. Just clearer. I didn't tell Lily anything. Not yet. Because I needed to hear it from him first. I needed to see how he would respond. When there was no space left to adjust the truth, I saw him the next day. Same place we usually met. Same time. And nothing about him felt different. That was the first thing I noticed. No hesitation. No awareness. Just normal. He greeted me the same way. Sat down the same way. Started talking the same way. Like everything was exactly where it had always been. And for a few minutes I let it stay like that. Because I wanted to see how long he would hold that version. Without interruption. He talked about his day. Work. Small things. Nothing important. Nothing that mattered. And I listened, not reacting, not guiding the conversation, just letting it play out, until there was a pause. And that's when I spoke. Who were you with yesterday? Simple, neutral, no accusation in my tone. He answered immediately. Work. No hesitation. No adjustment. Just the same answer he had already given me. And that was important, because it told me he was still relying on the same version, the same structure. I nodded slightly, like I accepted it. Then I asked, "Are you sure?" That was the shift.
Small.
But enough. He paused. Not long. Just a second. But it was there. And that pause didn't belong in something that was supposed to be certain. What do you mean? Still calm. Still controlled. But now there was awareness. I didn't explain right away. I just looked at him.
And said.
I spoke to her. That was the moment everything changed. Not loudly. Just instantly. Because now there was no space left. No version of this that could be adjusted. He didn't respond immediately. And that silence confirmed everything. Because up until that point, he always had something ready. But not this time. I didn't raise my voice.
I didn't repeat myself.
I just waited. Because I wanted to see how he would try to hold it together. And he tried. He said it wasn't what I thought. That things were complicated. That it didn't mean what it looked like. The same kind of structure. Just different words. But it didn't hold. Because I wasn't asking for an explanation. I was stating something that already existed. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I just said, "You've been seeing both of us."
Clear. Direct.
No emotion attached to it. And that was the point where everything stopped. Because there was no way to adjust that. No way to reshape it.
It was already complete.
He looked at me, like he was trying to find something to say. Something that would shift it. But there wasn't anything left. Because the truth doesn't leave space for interpretation once it's clear. After a few seconds, he stopped trying. Not completely, but enough. Enough that the conversation didn't move forward anymore. And that's when the silence settled. Not tense. Not emotional. Just final. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask how long. Because I already understood the structure. And the structure answers those questions on its own. I just looked at him. And for the first time, I wasn't seeing the version I had believed in. I was seeing the full version. The one that existed in both places. At the same time. And that was enough. Because once you see someone clearly like that, there's nothing left to figure out. I stood up.
Come.
Unhurried. And he didn't stop me. Not really. He said something. I don't even remember what. Because it didn't matter. The moment had already ended. Before he tried to continue it, I walked away. Not because I was overwhelmed. Just because there was nothing left to stay for. Nothing left to understand. The situation had already explained itself.
Completely.
And that was the moment everything shifted.
Not dramatically.
Not emotionally. Just fully. Because from that point on, there was no version of things where I didn't know. And once that happens, there's only one thing left. What you choose to do next. After that, I didn't go back to him. Not to talk. Not to explain. Not to ask anything else. Because there was nothing left that needed to be said. The situation had already explained itself.
Completely.
The first thing I did was think about Lily.
Not emotionally. Just clearly.
Because she didn't know. Not the full version. Not the part that involved me. And that mattered. I didn't rush to tell her. I didn't call her immediately. Because I needed to be sure of one thing. Not what happened, but how I was going to say it. And more importantly, why I was saying it. Because this wasn't about exposing him. It was about making sure she wasn't still inside something. Without knowing the full truth. I met her a couple of days later. Same place we usually went. Same kind of setting. Nothing that would make the moment feel heavier than it needed to. She started talking like she always did, about him, about what had been happening. And this time I didn't just listen. I let her finish.
Completely.
Without interruption. Because I needed her to say everything freely.
Before I changed anything.
And when she was done, there was a pause. The kind that usually means I would respond. Comfort her. Say something that helped her process it. But this time, I said something different. I know who you're talking about. She looked at me, confused, not understanding what I meant. And I didn't rush it. I just said it clearly. It's Mark. That was the moment everything stopped.
Not dramatically.
Just completely. Because it didn't make sense to her at first. There was no reason for it to. Those two parts of her life weren't connected. Just like they hadn't been for me. Until they were. She didn't respond right away. And that silence felt familiar. Because I had been in that exact moment myself. The moment where something doesn't fit yet. But you know it's about to. I explained it simply. Not emotionally. Not with detail that didn't matter. Just the structure. That I had been with him. That everything she described matched. That the timing aligned. That it wasn't separate. It was the same person. And I let it stay there. Because I didn't need to prove it. She already had everything she needed to understand it. Her own experiences.
Her own timeline.
Her own version of him. And once those connected, there was nothing left to question. She didn't react the way I expected. Not immediately. There was no outburst. No sudden emotion. Just stillness. Because sometimes, when something is that clear, your first response isn't reaction. It's processing. We sat there for a while, without saying much, because there wasn't anything that needed to fill that space. Everything had already been said. Eventually, she spoke. Quietly. More to herself than to me. And she said something that stayed with me. That's why it never made sense. And that was it. Not anger.
Not blame.
Just understanding.
We didn't talk about him after that.
Not in detail. Because there wasn't anything left to figure out. The situation had already answered itself. What mattered was what came next. And for both of us, it was the same. Distance. Not dramatic. Not announced. Just complete. He tried to reach out. A few messages. A call. Something about explaining. About things being complicated. But neither of us responded. Because there was no version of that conversation that would change what was already clear. And once something is that clear, you don't go back into it. You step out of it.
Completely.
My relationship with Lily changed after that. Not in a negative way. Just differently. There was more understanding. More clarity. Less assumption. Because we had both seen the same situation. From two different sides. And that kind of experience doesn't leave things the same. It makes them more defined. More real. We didn't blame each other. Because there was nothing to blame. We were both inside something we didn't have the full picture of. Until we did. And once we did, we chose the same thing. Not to stay in it. That was the part that mattered. Not what happened, but what we did after. I still think about it sometimes. Not emotionally. Not in a way that pulls me back. Just in a way that reminds me. Because that situation showed me something clearly. That people can maintain different versions of themselves. As long as those versions don't meet. And once they do, everything becomes visible at once. For me, that was enough. I didn't need an explanation from him. I didn't need to understand his reasoning. I already understood the structure. And the structure told me everything. So I moved forward. Without needing anything else from that situation. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to make something make sense. I was choosing something that already did.
Clarity.
If you've ever had a moment where two completely separate parts of your life suddenly connect in a way you never expected, you probably understand how this feels. Sometimes the truth isn't hidden. It's just separated. And once those pieces come together, Everything becomes clear all at once. If this story made you think about something in your own life, let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, there are more waiting for you right here.